Hi everybody, welcome back to the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host. I am the founder of stelliumastrology.com. I used to write horoscopes for Elle magazine and I'm a tutor at the London School of Astrology, among all sorts of other things. And today I wanted to talk to you about the aspects, the planetary aspects, kind of what the aspects are and also how they've been assigned their nature. So I'm going to share my screen with you because this is another enhanced podcast that you can also watch on YouTube, which is difficult to do without having visuals, basically. So let's go. By the way, if you haven't been on my website recently, I've been organising my posts so that you can go through and learn in a methodical manner. So don't forget to go and check that out. So let's have a quick look. So we've talked about the aspects, we've talked about the conjunction, opposition, square, trine, sextile, and I've touched on the minor aspect as well. So I had a little dive into the quincunx or the inconjunct, and then I briefly touched on some of the more minor aspects and hopefully can come back and revisit that in later shows. But as previously described, there are some time constraints. However, as far as the conjunction, the opposition, the square, and the trine and the sextile are concerned, why are they given these qualities of being either hard aspects or passive or coaxing? What is it about them that gives them, the trine giving it that kind of lucky flavor, or the sextile being some kind of favorable, opportunistic kind of aspect, as opposed to the square being quite a difficult and challenging aspect? So why does that happen? So I have mocked up this rather crude image. I did actually record this show and I did an audio version of the show, but it was just so talky that I thought it's probably better just to show you, and hopefully you can see and understand it. So here we have the moon in Cancer in its rulership, and the sun in Leo in its rulership. We have Mercury in Virgo and in Gemini in rulership. And we have Venus in Libra and Taurus, equally rulership. We have Mars in Aries and also in Scorpio, Mars traditionally being the ruler of Scorpio. And then we have Jupiter in Sagittarius, or Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, and Pisces as well, Jupiter traditionally ruling Pisces. And then we have Capricorn and Aquarius both being ruled by Saturn. So we're looking at the planets here ruling each of the signs of the zodiac, starting with the luminaries. Now, from the moon, if we go across to Venus, that's 60 degrees away. Well, if we go across to from Cancer to Taurus, the signs are 60 degrees apart. If we took it from 0 Cancer to 0 Taurus, that's 60 degrees apart. And the relationship between the luminary, the moon, and the ruler of Taurus being Venus, having that 60-degree relationship, it gives that 60-degree relationship that sense of Venusian quality. Equally, if we looked on the other direction and we went from the sun in Leo, so the sun ruling Leo, if we went from 0 Leo over to 0 Libra, Libra is also ruled by Venus. So we have this nice little Venusian from each of the luminaries, 60 degrees away, we have Venus ruling each of those signs. In turn, we also have the sun in relationship to Scorpio, which is 90 degrees apart. If we go from 0 Leo to 0 Scorpio, Mars is the planet that rules Scorpio traditionally. And if we look on the other side from the moon, going from 0 Cancer, for example, to 0 Aries, that again is a 90-degree relationship. As we know, 90 degrees is the square, the right angle. And Aries is ruled by Mars as well. So we have this Martian or martial relationship between signs that are 90 degrees apart. So that gives you a feel for what the square really feels like. It's not just, the square isn't actually necessarily always going to be conflict and argumentative as such. However, it is going to require action and attention. It's hard to ignore when you have a square in your natal chart. The planets that are square to each other are going to be constantly vying for your attention, and in a way that it's not necessarily an external experience. It doesn't have to be that you have a square in your chart and you attract somebody who brings out part of that square. It's more of an internal psychological conflict with yourself. It may be where you have daily, say, for example, I can give you a good example. I'm a Mercury Saturn square. I'm a Saturn Pluto square Mercury person, actually. I'm an overthinker. I'm somebody who's quite, I suppose, can be quite pessimistic, and that is a constant struggle between those two planets. If I sit down and I'm not being productive, Saturn wants productivity, I feel like I'm being lazy and I can't rest. So there's this sense of constantly, I've said it before in other episodes, the squeakiest wheel gets oiled first. The square is always kind of making itself known to you. And I suppose even if I decided to not do something, the square would appear in some way to me. If you ignore the aspects in some of the ways that they appear to you, they'll find another way to appear. So I thought that you might like to know that the square has that Mars quality, and particularly in synastry as well. What's interesting when you have Mars in synastry, a Mars square, for example, in synastry, so Mars is at square with another person's Mars, it's a real fiery martial butting of heads almost. Now, if we move on to, if we go from the sun, so the sun ruled 0 degrees Leo, for example, I've gone from about the midpoint in the diagram, so about 15. So let's say we're going from 15 Leo up to 15 Sagittarius there. So the sun ruled sign to the Jupiter sign is 120 degrees apart. That's the trine. So we have a trine from the sun ending in a Jupiterian sign, and a trine from the moon or from Cancer, the moon's sign, up to Pisces, again 120 degrees away, is a Jupiter ruled traditionally sign. So the trine has a Jupiter feel to it, which is nice because there is an ease, there is a limitless about it. It feels like it's almost heavenly, God-given potentially. There's a sense of having a natural gift, or a sense of being able to just, I always think of it as like pouring water from one receptacle to another. It just flows, or like water running downhill, for example. If the square, you could almost imagine, is like having to go through locks on a canal. One particular area on the canal that I used to live on was Devizes, which is a series of about 22 locks. If you wanted to go shopping, you had to go through those 22 locks, and it would take a day to get through them. The water doesn't naturally flow uphill, so you have to kind of, put your boat in the lock, and then you have to drain the lock down so it's at the level of the next level, and then do it again. So a masterful feat in engineering, absolutely incredible, but it doesn't flow. It's not like a waterfall that just is abundantly flowing and flowing off the edge. So the canal system wouldn't work without that kind of I don't know what the word is, but that kind of engineering, for example, that human intervention. So you could say that there's a bit more effort involved. It required a solution. It was probably has a bit of a square feel about it, whereas a river flowing down a hill and eventually getting to a point where there's a waterfall, there's nothing stopping it. It's just going in the direction it needs to go. It has a bit more of a trine feel about it. So that's how the trine gets assigned its Jupiterian flavour. And then we have the moon opposite So we've skipped one here. There is one that's skipped, anybody who's looking. And the logo, not the logo, the image to me looks a bit like the symbol for Volkswagen when you look at this diagram. So anybody who's listening to this, I will put it in the blog post, but also definitely come over to the YouTube video if you're having trouble visualizing what I'm saying, and you can see for yourself that it does look like a little Volkswagen logo. However, if we go from Cancer, the lunar luminary sign, the aspect that's missing here, because it's not considered a major aspect, is the quincunx, and that would be Cancer to Aquarius. Equally, from the Sun, if you're in Leo, the sign that is 150 degrees away, which is the quincunx, would take you to Capricorn. So those two signs are not detailed here because they're not major aspects, but I described in the aspects podcast that actually the quincunx gets its assignment because of its relationship from the ascendant to the 6th and 8th houses, which are generally associated with health, or can be associated with ill health, more to the point. And then houses are generally considered to be difficulty. They're not the easiest of houses. Anybody with a lot of planets in the 6th or 8th house will tell you from their own personal experience that they do struggle a little with certain aspects of life. We all do, but those are particularly difficult houses to master, I would say. However, we're skipping the quincunx because it's not major, and we're going from the Sun in Leo. So we're going from our solar luminary ruled sign and going directly opposite, 180 degrees away, and we have Aquarius, which is traditionally ruled by Saturn. So we have an opposition here. Now the opposition has many different expressions, like I've described. You can have a seesaw, it can be a bit of a tug of war with somebody else. It can be an incredibly challenging aspect. And I suppose the way we can look at Saturn sitting here, and in turn, if we're looking at the lunar luminary ruled sign of Cancer and going opposite 180 degrees to Capricorn, which is a Saturn ruled sign as well, we have a sense of Saturn being, the authority. It could be the naysayer. It could be the person who takes on this form of blockage in order for you to have to, rather than dealing with Saturn, having to go back and deal with yourself in some way. Or it could be that, they embody the quality of the opposition where they literally take on the form of whatever it is you're battling with, so they can be the area of projection. So it's interesting how these have been assigned. And this doesn't mean that you have to only have aspects from Cancer or Leo in order to experience these. This is how they were assigned in aspect to the luminaries, which is why we have this Venusian quality when it comes to the sextile, this martial quality when it comes to the square, this Jupiterian quality when it comes to the trine, and the Saturnian quality when it comes to the opposition, particularly when you think that, you have to cooperate with other people in order to get results. And Saturn can be cooperative, or he can be directly intentionally obstructive. So it's an interesting way to understand how the aspects are assigned their essence, their nature, and even more of an eye-opener when you think about, squares are a hard aspect, they're challenging. They are a Mars type of aspect in the chart. Mercury here isn't highlighted either because the semi-sextile, which is 30 degrees, isn't a major aspect either. So that's not highlighted, and like I said, neither is the quincunx. So these are just the major aspects that are listed on here. And obviously we don't have the conjunction on here because the conjunction is considered to be more neutral, which is once they're together, they kind of They are one to become one. Yep, I just cracked out the Spice Girls. But yeah, basically that's kind of the essence of that. So now we kind of understand how the aspects have been given their kind of their nature and their quality. What exactly are the aspects doing between the planets? So actually, like I've said as well, it doesn't have to be that the sun is square Mars and therefore that has got a Mars feel. It could be that the sun is square Mercury, or in my case, Mercury is square Saturn and Pluto. That Mars square is constantly driving. It's almost like a friction. It's almost like trying to start a fire with flint. You're getting sparks with a square. That's generally how I see it. It's like it's the aspect that's constantly creating sparks. It's the squeakiest wheel gets oiled first. It's this sense of, it just won't quit. You just can't, it just won't quit. You have to keep on pushing. So it's an interesting relationship. The square in your chart, if you have any squares, they are areas of constant improvement, and planets that communicate through a square will be almost having an argument with each other, but not in a negative way. It could be that they're debating, they're having they're part of the debate team, and they're constantly challenging you to think of new ways to work with those two planets in communication. It might be a difficult kind of conversation. It could be a Mercury-Neptune square, in which case, one of them's always looking for logic and sort of trying to make sense of things, whereas Neptune is constantly trying to get creative, be artistic, be poetic. Mercury wants to understand things in a clear and concise way. Neptune really clouds that confusion and really makes it difficult to see clearly. So it can be a challenging, constant, almost, it's like a constant improvement type of aspect. The sextile, as I've described it before, is a little bit like cats sitting in the sunny spot. That sunny spot's not going to be there all day. It will move. So there's an opportunity for the cat to sit in the sunny spot, but it's not going to be there forever. And equally, if you happen to have, a sextile in your chart or a sextile by transit, there's usually an opportunity in order for you to take advantage of. And sometimes you'll take it and sometimes you won't, but often when you don't, you might regret it. Natally as well with sextiles, there is that kind of relationship where you have a sense of just ease, really. And so the planets that are sextile to each other can describe a good working relationship between those two planets. Even potentially more difficult planets like Venus and Uranus together. It might be that actually you have lots of opportunities for relationships, and it might be that the thrill of a new relationship excites you. So you could find that the sextile could be challenging because you're constantly introduced to this new, I don't want to say forbidden fruit, but maybe, if you're in a relationship already, it can be difficult to sort of like keep your eyes to yourself. But in hand, it could be that, you're in a relationship that's very unconventional, and you're able to work with, a relationship where you've got loads of space with that Venus-Uranus contact. And maybe I saw an episode of Come Dine With Me. I don't know if you've got it in the US, but it's where strangers get together and they cook for each other one night each week, and then they score each other and somebody wins some money. And I was watching the couples version, and there was this one couple where the girl looked very much like blonde, almost wag, like really blonde and, likes to look nice and pretty and do herself up and everything. And she was going out with a guy who was just a total goth and wore white makeup and like really, really unusual couple. But that could be a Venus-Uranus sextile, two people who are very quirky, who work with each other, complement each other in a way that allows them to express themselves, who they are truly, and give each other the space that they need in order to do that. So you could say that, you could see that as an example. And with the trines as well, it's the quality. So the aspects describe almost the quality of the relationship. If you have a friend who you really like, but they get your back up sometimes, and they constantly push your buttons, you could say that that friendship is almost like a relationship that the planets have together, that are kind of almost Mars-like in quality. Because if one planet's talking to another one by square, they're pushing each other's buttons. Another friend that's always got like, oh, I've got this thing going on. I was thinking, did you want to come with me and meet this person? They might be able to open up your network for you. And you say, I'm not in the mood for it today. And then you've turned down an opportunity through a friend. That could be a relationship that sort of describes the sense of a sextile. Whereas with the trine, you've got this kind of, it's almost like a very comfortable aspect that is so comfortable, it's almost not noticeable sometimes. Some people have trines in their chart and they don't even realize, and they just work with this. They work with it in a really subconscious or unconscious way. And the other thing I will say, and I'm sure that I've said this before, is that just because a square is seen as challenging and more noticeable doesn't mean that it's not going to be better for you than perhaps a trine, which can be easy to allow yourself to get away with things, and a bit prone to laziness and almost, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I always think of it with the England football team, is they get complacent. They'll be playing, they'll score a goal and then they'll get complacent and then they'll concede a load of goals because they just thought they had it in the bag. And that's kind of like the trine. It's like, we've got a goal, well, we can rest now. It's like that person who's really procrastinates, and they kind of don't let anything. I don't know how many of you are procrastinators, but I can be a procrastinator. And it's that sense of, I'll do it tomorrow. It'll always be kind of in the back of your mind. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. There's always something more important to do. And then when it comes to it, you have not done what you needed to do. You've got a deadline in 6 hours and you have to just knock something out. You can almost see that as a bit of a trine quality. It's this kind of leaving things to the last minute. It can be just gifts where you're naturally good at just doing something anyway, and achieving something. If we were to talk about trines in the sense of a relationship, you could almost say there's a sense of a symbiotic nature about the trine, where it can be quite what's the word, enabling. It's quite an enabling aspect. But yeah, it's got its positives and its negatives. If you think about the qualities of Jupiter, if you think about Jupiter at his best and worst, you can then think about that in relationship to the trine and how that might reflect in planetary conversation, which is exactly what they're doing. The planets are having conversations with each other. The aspects describe the type of relationship that the planets are having with each other. And like I said, with the dinner party, you've got opposite the sun, you've got Saturn. So they're having a face-off together. They're in communication directly opposite each other. They can see each other. Often the opposition can bring into our experience or our consciousness the things that we don't necessarily embody ourselves. So a little bit like the ascendant-descendant axis. So the opposition can be a relationship where we are able to experience aspects of ourselves that we can't really integrate or don't recognize as part of our own experience. But equally, it can be a bit of a tug of war where we disagree and we struggle with working in a cohesive way with other people. So they're your people dining directly opposite. And then you've got, the people who are kind of a sextile away. They're still in relatively easy earshot. You don't have to shout across the table to them. You can still have quite a nice time with that cozy little group. Then you've got the person sitting 90 degrees away, which, you can see them, but you might have to lean forward a bit in front of a few other people, lean over to have a conversation. It's a bit more effort. You do have to talk across people. And then you've got that person who's sitting kind of trine, a natural aspect away from you, but a sort of a natural position which isn't too far for you to have to lean, and you can almost catch each other's conversation a little bit. You don't have to be rude and lean across people too much. So it's quite a nice way of thinking of it. And the sun and the moon, when they come together for their little new moon party each month, when they're in conjunction, they're having a conversation, they're passing news to each other. That in turn creates a conversation between the two of them. And for that period in time that they come together, they're in each other's pocket. They're thick as thieves. And it's not necessarily the sun and moon. Any planetary conjunction, once they come together, they bring a bit of each experience and they integrate it and leave you with a combined experience. And in the natal chart, if you have conjunctions, those two planets don't really work alone. Like Sue Tompkins said, it's like ringing a bell, and however close they are, either same degree, ringing the bell at the same time, or if they're a few degrees apart, you ring that bell and then ring that bell. So you do have that kind of sense of communication between them that is very tightly knit, closely knit. So I really hope this has kind of made sense. The aspects are kind of like a planetary conversation. It's how they cooperate with each other or don't cooperate. In the quincunx episode, I do touch on the fact that it's a bit more like a light switch. Either one side's working or the other one is. It requires a lot of self-awareness to be able to get those two working together. It's often a very difficult thing to do. With an opposition, you can work together with somebody who is your opposite. It can work, but sometimes it's more of a tug of war. Sometimes it's a bit more of a seesaw where one person's a bit more present than the other. But it's definitely a kind of way of trying to understand this communication. Always with the oppositions, I would say it does describe relationships. It does describe relationships. And perhaps the square kind of describes a relationship with yourself and how you feel about things, and maybe your outer and inner world in a sense as well. So just some food for thought for you. Hopefully you found it very useful, and you can go away and use that in your own astrological practice now. I know there are some people who already know this stuff who are listening to this podcast. This is for the people that don't know. So hopefully, you can go away now and really start pulling it all together. And if you have a better way of describing it, and would like to share with me some of your own personal ideas about what the aspects mean and how they relate to each other, please do get in touch. Stephanie@stelliumastrology.com. Here's the website if you haven't already. If you aren't aware, this is my website here. And you can contact me. You can check out the Patreon page up here in membership. You can subscribe to my mailing list, and you can submit your chart to be reviewed or explored on the podcast. There's a bit about me on the about page. Just go check it out and see what you think. Thanks very much for tuning in. It's been good catching up with you guys again, and I will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye.